Okay.
Um, uh, we get Reverend Williams. Okay, thank you so much.
So
Get her up.
you do know that you the same issue where you're cut.
Okay, you're
Having
cutting
the
off.
same issue where you're going in and out. Yeah, yeah.
Right now,
Oh, yeah, right now.
I'm going in and out right now
Yes.
on
So
Facebook.
it's happened throughout the yeah, yeah.
I don't know what that's
It's
about.
happened
Let me
throughout
just do
the
this.
show.
Okay, yeah. Okay. Well, let me plug this back in. Goes.
Regain control.
Mm-hmm.
Going straight to voicemails, what Cosme says. We will continue calling.
Okay, just continue to call her, and then we'll get Dr. Knighton up as well. By,
Dr.
by,
Knighton up. Okay, if we don't get her still.
no, we're going to keep on trying for Reverend Williams. I connected with her last night. You know, she might not be expecting to hear from us so early. So, okay. I want to. Hey, Kenneth and Andre and Effie. How you doing, Carol? Hey, hey, hey. So, whew, I know the sun is in my face. I need to get a screen so I can lock that. Goodness gracious. So how are we sounding now, Marnie? So let me hear from her. Let me hear how we're sounding.
Okay.
No, just bring her up very briefly for that because we can let her go. How is it sounding now, Marnie? I'm still cutting off?
Still have the yeah.
Okay, I don't know what to do about it.
No, it's been happening the last couple of days. So
I know. I'm just saying I don't know what to do about it. I don't know what to do.
Where is she hearing you cut out? Because I'm not here.
Show is fine, even though it happens.
Where is it cutting out, Marnie? Marnie, where's it cutting out?
When you're speaking, sometimes it cuts out and your screen will freeze.
Okay, then that's a Facebook issue, right?
It's either a Facebook or a Wi-Fi issue.
Okay, all right. So that's nothing that they can do at the station. Okay, so I'm going to let you all go. You and Maria go. If I don't speak with any of you, with either of you, have a great weekend. Have a great holiday.
Thank you so
Be
much.
blessed and be safe. Have a safe ride. Oh boy.
Okay, Reverend Williams is here.
Okay, great. Reverend Williams,
Good morning.
how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you.
Good. I'm so glad to hear it.
Great. And please stay in touch with Reverend. Excuse me, with Dr. Furholden.
Yes,
And
I
we
left her a message.
and we can leave it at that.
Yes,
Okay.
I left her a message.
Okay, because we're on Facebook now.
Yes, I know.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much. Hey, everybody. You know, it's the 4th of July weekend. So what does that mean? We're going to be talking about what the 4th of July means to different people in the United States, Reverend Williams. Of course, you have the famous Frederick Douglass speech. What's the 4th of July mean to the Negro? But, the first people, I think, people we exclude from the conversation are the indigenous people. And so we're going to have the principal chief of the Cherokee Nations with us today, Chuck Hoskins, to talk to us about what the 4th of July, thank you so much, what it means to him, what it means to the indigenous peoples, because he speaks for a good many of them. And then, of course, we're going to be talking about what it means just to all of us. I want all of you to call in today. Let's talk about that. But first up, we're going to talk about President Trump. And is he positioned well for 2024? I mean, even with these indictments, sometimes when people indict you and prosecutions can be viewed as persecutions by your supporters. Reverend Williams, it all depends upon your point of view. So think about that. Think about that, everybody. Is this positioning him? And is this putting him in a stronger position for 2024? Then we're going to start off, of course, with Pastor Tisha Williams giving us good news. We always love hearing from her. And then we will hear from Dr. Shanina Knighton. She's going to give us some tips on how to remain safe
Minute left.
Thank you so much. How to remain safe and during this 4th of July weekend where we're reopening, and yet they're telling people in Los Angeles to wear masks. I'm going to be in Los Angeles next weekend, Dr. Reverend Williams, one of my best friends, is getting married. You know,
Oh,
we're
boy.
going to take rapid tests before we go to. I'm going to be testing just about every day before I get on the plane. And then after I get off the plane, I'm going to test, and I'm going to test again because I got to go to a party Friday night, and then
5 seconds.
you know, in the morning, and just, you know, what are you going to do? But even with those who are vaccinated,
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
hey, everybody, welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. It's just before the 4th of July. I'm so excited. Are you excited? It is Friday, July 2nd, 2021, the 4th of July weekend. What does the 4th of July mean to you? Call me at 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278. We're going to be talking, really pivoting off of the Frederick Douglass speech. What does the 4th of July mean to the Negro? But we also want to talk to indigenous peoples. We will have the principal chief of the Cherokee Nations, Chuck Hoskin, on to talk with us about what the 4th of July means to indigenous peoples. He speaks for a good many of them. And we're going to have a wonderful panel to talk about that. And of course, we'll be talking about these Trump indictments and what they mean. Are they going to Some people see them as a prosecution. His supporters might see them as a persecution. Is this going to position him more strongly for 2024? And then going to get some wonderful tips from Dr. Shanina Knighton about how you can stay safe during this 4th of July holiday. And, of course, good news from Pastor Tisha Dixon Williams. Let's get to these headlines, everybody, so we can get to the show today. Everybody, it's going to be kind of cool in Chicago, but beautiful. Partly cloudy, 70 degrees. Minneapolis, St. Paul, 88 degrees. Mostly sunny. The Dow closed up 131 points. Yesterday, NASDAQ closed up 18 points. S&P 500 closed up 22 points. Well, the White Sox were triumphant over the Twins, 8-5. The Twins will be playing the Royals later on today. The White Sox will be playing the Tigers, and the Cubs will be facing off against Cincinnati. The Bucks 123, the Hawks 112. Wow, the House voted to create a select committee to investigate the deadly January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol, and it's becoming a politically fraught assignment. Republicans have made it clear that they're not interested in creating this committee, and House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy even threatened to strip his party members of other committee assignments if they accepted an offer from the House Speaker. Wow, the House Speaker, Nancy Pelosi, to serve. So far, Republican Representative Liz Cheney has been tapped as one of the Democratic House Speaker's committee picks. Who else will be picked? And if they're picked, will they be punished for accepting the assignment from the Speaker of the House, everybody? The Speaker of the House. More local officials in the United States are sounding the alarm over another possible wave of COVID-19, just as people are setting off their 4th of July holiday. For instance, places in Arkansas have seen a surge, and Governor Hutchinson there says that more than 90% of active virus cases are among unvaccinated people. To combat the spread of the Delta variant, the Biden administration is planning to deploy response teams across the U.S. all across America with high infection rates. Indeed, they're deploying people in Chicago to give you shots at home. What do you think about that? As for vaccines, Johnson & Johnson says data shows its vaccine provides immunity that lasts at least 8 months and appears to provide adequate protection against the Delta variant. Well, for those of us who are voting rights advocates, it was a tough day. The Supreme Court dealt a blow to the fight to preserve voting rights. The court yesterday ruled two provisions of an Arizona voting law that restrict how ballots can be cast do not violate the historic Voting Rights Act that bars regulations that result in racial discrimination. Critics see the ruling as essentially gutting what's left of the Voting Rights Act. Indeed, some people call the Voting Rights Act now a dead letter This also means that the restrictive voting laws that Republican-led states are implementing this year are more likely to withstand legal challenges. You know, we're going to be talking about that next week. Rescue efforts at the Florida condo collapse site could face more challenges soon as a tropical storm, oh my goodness, approaches, and risk of further collapse lingers. Work had to be halted for much of yesterday, everybody, as engineers assessed the structure still standing. The rest of the building is expected to be demolished in coming weeks. Of course, we are sending our love and prayers to all of our brothers and sisters down in Florida, because that is really, really, really tough. People are just wondering, they just want to be able to bury their loved ones, and they're not able to do that. They're not able to do that. Well, we'll just see how all of that goes, everybody, in this holiday weekend. Hopefully that storm will not create more difficulty. U.S. forces have left Afghanistan after nearly 20 years, everybody. The airfield, Bagram, was handed over to the Afghan National Security and Defense Force entirely, a clear indication that the remaining U.S. troops have left the region or are planning to do so. What do you think about that? They're saying that that's America's longest war, but what about Korea? You know, we signed an armistice with them, not a peace treaty. Restaurants are starting to hire robots instead of people who are demanding higher pay, according to this Business Insider article. Just 10% of job seekers are urgently looking for openings, everybody, according to a recent survey hired by the hiring giant Indeed, whether it's because of virus fears, childcare costs, financial cushions, or enhanced unemployment benefits, or the fact that they don't want to go back for such low wages. Well, this is hitting the restaurant industry and hospitality space in a special way. So now restaurants are now hiring robots instead of people. What do you think of that? Ow. Pastor Tisha Williams. Whew. You know, I thought they were going to do that. I thought they were going to go to robots. Unbelievable. You can't replace people, everybody. You can't replace people. Pastor Tisha Dixon Williams, First Baptist Church in Bridgehampton, New York. I know it is packed out there. These people are ready for the 4th of July. Oh my gosh. Love it.
It is packed and crazy out here. It took me 20 minutes to get through town yesterday, which is a 3-block drive. And the supermarket was wiped out when I went last night.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, they are here. It is packed. It is packed.
Oh.
This holiday weekend is underway.
Bless your heart. I love it. I love it. I mean, look, when I lived out there, boy, we had some fun. Had some fun out that way. Because my friends are out there right now. I'm sorry, making your life a little more hectic. Yes.
Well, I'm sure if they're your friends, they're okay.
oh, they are. They're really nice. They're really nice, and they keep to themselves. You know, just nice house, nice houses, and everybody goes from place to place eating all weekend. Right. It's just fun. It's just fun. Yeah. So let's have some good news, because we sure do need it. Every day is just something new, Pastor Williams.
We sure do. So I want to talk to you from this thought: power under control. I want to talk about meekness today. In the Gospel of Matthew 5:5, it says, "Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth." And then going back just for another scriptural reference in the book of Numbers, it says, "Now the man Moses was very meek, above all the men which were upon the face of the earth." Now, by this 12th chapter of the book of Numbers, we've seen God's constant provision for the people of Israel. God's freed them from captivity. He was water when they're thirsty, provided food when they were hungry. And yet, for all God had done, for all they witnessed, for all they've been delivered from, the people were still complaining. And I have come to learn that it's impossible to make everyone happy. And if God can't do it, it would be fruitless for us to try. Think about it. When it's cold, we say it's too cold. If it's hot, it's too hot. And when it's rainy, there's no sun. When it's rainy or cold, oh, we need snow. I mean, we just complain. And perhaps there's no one who knew this better than Moses, God's servant and chosen leader of the people of Israel. Now, if you can imagine this, he's mobilizing 2 million people. That's no easy task. If we're honest as leaders, mobilizing 2 people can often feel Herculean. Mm-hmm. Think about it. This is 2 million people in a radically new environment. 2 million people adjusting to a new normal Does that sound familiar? 2 million people trying to accept a new leader in the person of Moses, and with all of that comes, Lord, help him. 2 million opinions. It's clear that Moses faced his fair share of power struggles. What is a power struggle? It's a situation where two or sometimes more people compete for power or influence. This can be between parent or child, between organizations, political parties, friends, even between partners in a romantic relationship. We're constantly witnessing power struggles in our nation's capital. That's true. Look at it. We're having a power struggle in the restaurant industry now between robots and live bodies. Life is full of power struggles. And here in the text, we find Moses engaged in a power struggle with his siblings. And yet, even in this, Moses maintains his meekness. Here we see meekness in action. What does it mean to be meek? I have a simple definition for it, but it means to humble oneself. It means pertaining to a state of unpretentious attitudes of behavior. When you're meek, you have a proper awareness of your lower status before God or in society. The meek person adopts this as his or her motto. In himself, nothing. In God, everything. You all need to write that down. In him or herself, nothing. In God, everything. Meekness is not weakness, but here's the definition. Meekness is power under control. That when you would go off, that when you would go crazy, you keep it under control. It has been said that nothing discloses real character like the use of power. It's easy for the weak to be gentle. Most people can bear adversity. But if you wish to know what a man really is, give him some power. With power struggles comes persecution. What do I mean by persecution? It means from the Latin word persecut, meaning followed with hostility. Persecution means hassling or singling out a person or a group because of race, religion, ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender, or social status. And often when your social status changes from pawn to power player, that's when you can expect some persecution. Let me help you. Have you ever been promoted and everyone questions why you got the job above everyone else? Have you ever been thrust in a leadership position only to be challenged at every turn? Santita, you're a history maker right now. I'm sure you have your fair share of power struggles in the radio industry. With power struggles comes persecution. There'll always be naysayers. There'll always be haters. There'll always be doubters. But here's the good news. Never let that stop you from operating in the gifts, talents, and abilities that God has given you. Where would Jesus be if he had allowed the cynicism of the Pharisees and Sadducees to hinder his ministry? They challenged him at every turn. And yet for the hateration, Jesus did not let that stop him from fulfilling the great work of redemption. He said, you're hating, I'm going to keep healing. Keep reviling me, and I'll keep raising the dead. Go ahead and berate me. The blind will still see. Jesus never let a hater halt him, and I'm encouraging you to do the same. As a matter of fact, later in the Beatitudes, Jesus encourages that the more you're persecuted, the more blessed you are. The Message version says it this way, you're blessed when your commitment to God provokes persecution. The persecution drives you even deeper into God's kingdom. Not only that, count yourself blessed every time people put you down or throw you out or speak lies about you to discredit me. What it means is that the truth is too close for comfort and they are uncomfortable. You can be glad when that happens. Give a cheer even, but though they don't like it, I do. Stay meek, guys. Power under control.
I love that. Thank you for that. If you want to give a man, if you want to test someone's character, Lincoln sure did say it. Give him or her power, and you will see who someone really, really, really is. Amen to that. Amen to that. And we're seeing that now. We're seeing that. We're seeing that. Pastor Tisha Dixon Williams, I pray that you have a wonderful, wonderful holiday. I hope that you will be safe.
Thank you.
I hope that you will be safe. And I just thank you for this wonderful word. I thank you for this wonderful word today because we really, we do need to, what Norma Jean said, amen. I mean, you're getting a whole lot of hand waves today. Let's bring up Dr. Shanita Knight and stay right here because you might have some questions for her too. Because now more and more churches, people coming back to church, people are, America is reopening and different parts of the world are handling this reopening differently because we're still in the midst of a pandemic. I mean, we're still here, everybody. We're still here. They're telling the vaccinated and the unvaccinated, if you will, those who've gotten the jab and those who haven't gotten the jab in LA. They're saying, hey, do not, everybody should wear a mask. Wow. I said, whoa, hold on. Everybody's supposed to wear a mask? Yeah, everybody is. Dr. Shanina Knighton, we need some help here on how we can remain safe, in this July 4th weekend. Millions of people will be traveling. And of course, Dr. Shanina Knighton, resident scholar at Case Western Reserve University. She is one of the few infection preventionists in the world. Just think about it. There are almost 7 billion people. There are about 16,000 of you. So it's not a whole lot. But we need to know how we can prevent infection. Now, they're saying in Los Angeles that those who've gotten the jab and those who haven't gotten the jab, Dr. Knighton, that you're supposed to still wear a mask because of the Delta variant. What's going on here?
So I will be honest, I have been saying from the beginning of time, whether we have vaccines around or not, that given our experience with the flu vaccine of knowing that it wears off so quickly, is that we should never have stopped wearing masks in certain locations. I think the problem is that we were wearing them everywhere, including some people even wanting individuals to wear masks outside where there's fresh air. And so now when we're thinking about these measures and they're saying everyone mask up again, I honestly think the logical thing would have been to give people situations of where they should wear masks, not saying, oh, everyone's in mask again for all circumstances. This isn't surprising to me because right now we're in a situation of where we still do not know how long the COVID-19 vaccines are going to last. And they're not sure in regards to not just the Delta variant, because we know that the vaccines do provide some protection against it in regards to how severe it can be or even possibly causing death. The issue is what happens when that Delta variant continues to get around and it mutates, and then another variant of COVID comes along that may be deadlier, that is even more resistant to the vaccine itself. I remind people that while this may seem like shocking news, most of us know that multi-drug resistant organisms, or what I would call antibiotic resistant organisms, we know that these things exist now. That's why penicillin doesn't work for everything anymore. So as we're continuing to think about the evolution of ourselves and us changing, we have to also understand that these bugs are not standing stagnant and that they are continuing to move around too. So my recommendation is, as long as you are washing your hands, as long as you are conscious of what you're touching, as long as you are making sure that the environment around you, specifically surfaces, are clean, including your third hand, which is your cell phone, then you can lower your risk of being able to get sick. Remember, all of these measures are put in place for you to decrease your risk.
What else can we do? I mean, now we're out and about. I mean, millions of people are going to be traveling between airports, cars, and a lot of people, you don't know who's gotten the jab, who is safe. Because I was looking at the reporter, reading Dr. Leanna Wen from the medical analyst from CNN. And of course, she has been at George Washington University. She's got credentials that are as stellar as yours. And she's saying that basically the vaccinated and the unvaccinated really shouldn't mix. How would that work?
So that's not going to work. Let's be honest, Santita, like some of us within our very families, people that we love, people that we may care for, some of them are vaccinated and some of them are not vaccinated, right? Mm-hmm. For many reasons. It could be personal health reasons, it can be religious reasons, but these are still individuals that are going to engage for one reason or another. And so when we think about saying put vaccinated together and put unvaccinated together, Santita, that separates us from our kids. So how do you separate the vaccinated versus the unvaccinated And we got kids that can't get vaccinated yet. Or right now, there's controversy around the vaccines in regards to kids, and we know the clinical trials are still going on. So I'm just asking, like, to me, logically, that wouldn't make sense that we would separate vaccinated versus unvaccinated.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that we need to worry about our toolkit right now and think about the things that we can change. And right now, I can tell you, I have witnessed relaxed measures when it comes to infection prevention in the communities again. Meaning, I'm not seeing the cashiers wipe off the counters anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I'm even in TSA, they're handling thousands and thousands of IDs every day, and that person has on the same glove. So then if that person has on the same pair of gloves and they go to sweep their hair or wipe their face accidentally and they came in contact with someone that had COVID, that person then now becomes a transmitter of COVID just by doing their job. And so individuals don't think about that. So they're not going to wipe down their plastic, even though we know that COVID loves to live on plastic. So they're not going to wipe down their plastic after the person at TSA has looked through it. They're not going to think about cleaning their hands after they've left through the line. So these are things that we should be thinking about, though, is when we are interacting with others, what cleaning measures can we put in place? Not to assume that they've cleaned things for us, but to assume that we need to clean things and that everything around us is dirty because it's not our home environment. And I think that is going to be the biggest safety mechanism, in addition to us understanding how we're eating. Let's be honest, we're going out of town. I'm not going to tell anybody what quantity to drink or, their own lifestyle habits, but just understand that some of the things for which we may consume can lower our immune system. If you're a smoker, understand that COVID is an infectious respiratory disease that, yes, it wreaks havoc on the rest of the body, but it definitely wreaks havoc on the immune system and can cause pneumonia. So if that is the case, then you want to say, is this the right time for me to be smoking right now? Or should I consider scaling back or coming to a short halt?
I've got about 30 seconds. What about buffets, just very quickly? Because, hey, the ribs are going to be out and everything else, and potato salad. Just what do we do about that?
I would suggest to everyone that there is a hand sanitizing station there. I would also recommend there only being a few people that are serving food to others. You run the risk of someone not cleaning their hands correctly and everyone going down and touching the spoons. You also want to make sure that as people are preparing the food, that they are not sitting the food down in the pans, which will come in contact with the food. Because again, no, COVID is not transmitted by food, but there are other things that can be transmitted in terms of germs. So you just want to think about how the serving spoons are handled. If you're playing cards and it's not with masks, think about yelling over the table like I know how my family does. So think about all of the droplets that can potentially be on the table and wipe those surfaces up. Even if you're only doing it once an hour, it's going to decrease the chances of some germs spreading.
That is
someone
it.
is contaminated, but they may not know.
That is it. Back in just a minute. Ooh. Dr. Knighton, this was not long enough. Dr. Knighton, can you bring her back up, please? Close me. Dr. Knighton? Okay, Dylan, help him bring her back up, please. Dr. Knighton?
Yes, I'm here.
Hey, thank you so much. That was not long enough. Oh my gosh, you know what? I'm just thinking maybe we should do something real quick later on today and just put it up so people can, because I started thinking about buffets and people breathing over the food and all of that. You know what I'm saying? Oh,
yeah.
My mind just started going. I said, oh my gosh, wait a minute. This is, and I'm telling you, when I heard her advice about what to do about the vaccinated and the unvaccinated, I was like, wait a minute. the fact that we're using the language of vaccinations, people think that they are immune. Dr.
But
Knighton?
do you hear that?
Yes.
I hear you. Listen, it's upset. It's so upsetting to me because it's like this is not the end all be all when it comes to protection. And to hear people try to separate people out like that when we're talking about a vaccine versus a not vaccine, when here it is, some of the individuals that are vaccinated could still be super spreaders. And then the fact that kids can't be vaccinated now, and the fact that this breakthrough variant is still affecting people that are vaccinated. I just think that it's more of a thing to separate us than to bring us together. And I don't think that that's the logical thing to do. But I think that there's more power in everybody practicing the same level of infection prevention because I want to protect them and they want to protect me, opposed to me saying, oh, you got your vaccine? Okay, if you don't, I don't want to be around you. That is so inhumane to me.
Well, that's what we're doing. And if you don't have the vaccine, you're not safe. I'm like, wait. You can still give me this. You can give it to me.
Attorney Hoffler and Patillo are on.
It's
It's
crazy.
interesting dynamic.
Well, I mean, it's, it's to push everybody into it. I get it. But the thing is, what you all need to be doing is also push people into infection prevention. How about that? Into being safe. I mean, I'm not, people, because I've had more people come to me, and they, come into my apartment. I put my mask on before I let people in. And they're like, well, I've got my shots. I'm like, that doesn't mean anything. You could bring it to me. I could give it to you. What? Girl. Oh.
Yeah. No, I get it. Trust me, it's upsetting, like, to me, just because I think it's all of this separation. And, and Dr. Dan said this before. It's a tool in your toolkit, which I greatly agree. And most people are saying, like, they're acting like it's a cure. Mm-hmm. And that's what's very upsetting. And the fact that
they're being told it. I mean, the subtle message is, if you get the vaccine, it's going to be okay. No, it's not. They're even telling you this is not going to last for a lifetime. It can last. J&J said 8 months. Will you know when it begins to wear off? I mean, I just. Oh, girl, I just.
But that's my concern, though. And I mean, honestly, I was telling somebody that not too long ago. Look at what's happening to people. Meaning the messaging that is being given. So people are hanging on to whatever hope they can right now. Mm-hmm. And that's the unfortunate piece about it. Because remember, it was, everyone stay home for 2 and we can flatten the curve. Stay home for 2 weeks and we can flatten the curve. And what did that end up doing? Turning into schools getting shut down. Then it was, everyone mask up and we
30 seconds.
Can flatten the curve, or we can turn this thing around. What did that turn into? Mask mandate. Then it's, guess what? Everybody go out and get vaccinated. And when we get vaccinated, then we can start opening everything back up.
Hold on. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to call you later because we're going to do a little special. It'll take about 15 or 20 minutes, okay? I'm going to work.
5 seconds.
I'm going to call you back. I'm going to call you back.
Okay.
Change the world. We can change the world. We can change the world. Change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love. It's not too late. Gotta save the children. We can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. July 4th weekend, everybody. It's Friday, July 2nd. 2021, WCPT, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, and AM 950 radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. Call me, text me, 773-763-9278, 773-763-9278, or WCPT. I cannot wait to hear your voices today. Of course, I just spoke with Dr. Knight, and we're going to do a little quick special. So just stay tuned to the Santita Jackson and Friends Facebook page. Because I'm going to do that about what we can do to help keep you protected during this 4th of July holiday weekend. really. And we'll do that. And she's got a real passion for that, as you know, one of the few infection preventionists in the world, everybody in the world. And so we're just grateful to have her. And all the practical information that she gave us has just been a joy. So stay tuned for that a little bit later on today. Okay, it's the 4th of July weekend. What does the 4th of July mean to you? But let's start off with what's happening in the Republic itself. Many people are wondering what is going on with President Trump. Will these indictments help him become a stronger candidate in 2024? I mean, prosecutions on one side are viewed as persecutions by your supporters. So, longtime Trump Organization Chief Financial Officer Alan Weisselberg was charged yesterday with 15 felony counts in connection with what Manhattan prosecutors have called a sweeping and audacious illegal payment scheme involving alleged tax fraud and other criminal offenses. Legal and other experts weighed in on what these charges could mean, and that's what we have our legal eagles and, our great social scientist on with us to talk about. I mean, just first of all, of course, we've got attorney C.K. Hoffler, president of the National Bar Association and chair of Rainbow Push. And we've got the Southeastern Regional Director of Rainbow Push, great civil rights lawyer and radio host, Robert Patillo. On Sunday, what will he be talking about? I don't know, but I know it's going to be great. From 1 to 4 on Sunday on WAOK. And of course, C.K. Hoffler will be back on her show on WAOK on Tuesday from 11 to 12 Eastern Standard Time. And of course, Dwight McKee, noted social scientist. All right, CK, I want to hear from you and Robert. What are these indictments about? Attorney C.K. Hoffler.
Good morning, Santita, and to this wonderful panel. So these indictments are about the chickens coming home to roost, in my impression. During the entire presidency of Donald Trump, there have been significant allegations and concerns about financial impropriety, wrongdoing, and illegal activity in the Trump organizations, in New York in particular. So the concept that his top financial advisor of decades, who also advised his father, would be indicted, and that there is major litigation is not new in terms of the concept. But what is shocking to me is that the Manhattan District Attorney and the Attorney General of New York actually took these steps and implemented and acted on evidence that they suspected existed, and now we know potentially exists, that could result in the destruction of what they believe is a criminal enterprise in New York, at least in New York, and it has tentacles elsewhere. So the fact that the CFO of the Trump Organization, I'm just going to call it Trump Organizations for lack of having to name all the different entities, has been indicted, and they're of course going to try to flip him because he does know where all the bodies are buried, but not just relative to President Trump's engagement and involvement and his family's engagement and involvement, but going way back to when his father was at the helm of some of these organizations. So I think that the tax benefits, the irregular accounting schemes, and other things of that nature that could amount to income tax evasion are real possibilities. And we definitely, I believe, will see, if the evidence does hold out, people going to jail. The only question is, will it reach Donald Trump? Will it reach his children? And I suspect that the answer is yes, because the immunities that may have existed when he was the sitting president of the United States no longer exist, as he's now a past president and a civilian. So what we're seeing, I say the chicken coming home to roost, is evidence, and there are a lot of people who engage in illegal frauds and illegal schemes to defraud the government, irregular accounting, falsifying different things, but they don't always get caught. There are a lot of billionaires where there are allegations against them, but this is a case where the state of New York is saying enough is enough. And they made a promise, and they're out to get him. And now, when I say out to get him, for illegal activity, financial activity. It is white-collar crime, but the key is still crime. And I do believe that it's going to happen. And ultimately, I do believe, even though it may be difficult and challenging, and every credible defense lawyer in New York is going to be on the Trump defense team, but I do think ultimately it will reach the president.
Robert Patillo, what do you make of this?
Well, CK was very comprehensive in her explanation and laying things out in this way. It's going to be interesting because Weisselberg, the CFO of the Trump organization, has been indicted for not paying taxes on over $2 million in income. That's how they were able to directly tie it to him, because they basically weren't paying taxes on perks and benefits. So things like free apartments, free travel, free cars, those sorts of things, they were not paying taxes on. Now, they were not able to tie it to Trump because the Trump organization, two sets of books. They keep a set of books for internal use, and then there's another set of books they basically use to pay the government on, and they make sure that no matter what happens, none of it gets tied back to the president. However, this will affect the president's bottom line. We know before going into the White House, he had significant amounts of debt, that he had been bankrupt on, I think, 14 different occasions. So how will it affect him and affect the rest of his business enterprises for the Trump organization and its money-making apparatus to now be under federal investigation and effectively halted? We also know that because of his antics as president, many of his resorts and hotels and casinos have been suffering financially because the names have become all but toxic when it comes to the travel and leisure space. And so it's going to be interesting to see how the financial aspects of this going forward affect his political aspirations thereafter, because it's going to be very difficult to run the same race he ran in 2016 if he's running without the financial backing of the Trump organization and many of his other donors, who maybe won't want to be connected with something which is going through criminal prosecution, with the fear that it may expose them and their accounting and money making schemes. Well, I think also what this tells almost every lower people on other parts of the socioeconomic totem pole is exactly what we've always thought, which is that rich folks don't pay no taxes. That all this money that we're spending, all this talks about tax cuts, all that we know is that people at the top of the economy aren't paying any money into the nation, and they're getting every benefit from it.
Do you think that this is going to impact him politically going forward, Robert?
I think with his base, this just makes him stronger with his base. By as far as expanding it out, I don't see how this makes his base larger. The people who are Trump supporters, they're going to say, well, this is part of the continuous witch hunt. The man's not even in office anymore, and you're still harassing him. You're chasing him till the ends of the earth. This is part of the deep state conspiracy to stop him. So, of course, he's right in everything that he says. But I think for the rest of America, they're just tired of it. They're just exhausted of the entire process. And that's where quite many people are at.
Dwight McKee, your thoughts?
Well, very interesting. One of the reasons it was very important yesterday for them to overturn that Bill Cosby conviction is because that is the circumstances that they're counting on to be able to flip Trump and indict him. They're hoping that he steps on Trump and testifies against him. And it was very important that they reinforced the notion, the concept, that once you put a deal with the government would stick to your deal for cases like this. So that Bill Cosby case has to take on a real significance in a case like this. The problem you run into, though, in a case like this is a couple. One is it's the American way. It is how business is done. Bankruptcy for Trump is not a circumstance.
It's a what? I'm sorry, Dwight, you're going in and out. We want to get you in one good place.
policy for Trump is not a circumstance, it's a strategy. It is how they avoid paying some people and borrow money from banks and hold on to the money that they borrow. It's really a con game. But it's a game that most major corporations play, which is how most of them are able to not pay taxes while they make billions and trillions of dollars. And so it is really the American way. It is the way business is done in America. When you go to trial for Trump, you will have to have some Republicans on the jury, and you will run the list of jury nullification. So it's going to be very hard, I think, to convict anybody on these charges because many people, especially those in the jury pool, will see it as a witch hunt. And it's going to be hard to indict the same way it was hard to impeach Trump. They will see it as a witch hunt, and it will make him in many ways an own support his apprentice that they're out to get him, and there's nothing legitimate about these charges. And so I think it'll be an exercise at one level in futility. Maybe one or two accountants at some levels may get fined. Maybe one may do 6 or 7 months. But for the most part, I don't think that much will come of this.
Well, he said the political witch hunt by the radical left Democrats, with New York now taking over the assignment, continues. It is dividing our country like never before. This was a statement just after the indictments were unsealed. He continued, do people see the radical left prosecutors and what they are trying to do to 75 million plus voters and patriots for what it is? Wow, it sounds like, Robert, you talked about this parallel government, and Dwight McKee, you did too, this parallel government that would be set up. It seems like he's doing it. More than 2 million people streamed his rally last week. I mean, it's like, it's not just his base. He doesn't just have a base. I think that shrinks the number of his supporters. I think that he's got a real big chunk of support out there. How do you think they're going to perceive this? Because he's speaking to these people, and I think we need to be clear on the fact that when he speaks, he does this with surgical precision. Robert Patillo. He knows whom he's speaking to and what he's saying to them.
Well, exactly. And let's understand, when President Trump said I could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue and not lose any support, for some reason folks thought that he was kidding. He was not. There's absolutely nothing that President Trump could do that would cause any of his supporters to leave his side. You can lose an election by 8 million votes. They'll still be behind you. We can have the election certified. They're still behind you. You can have 500,000 people die while you're president because of your mismanagement of a virus. They will still be behind him. So this idea that there's any form of fact or truth or thing that you're going to do that's going to suddenly be an aha moment, I think folks got to get that out of their heads and realize that no matter what information is produced, if they produce a video of Trump and a pile of money, throwing it in the air, saying that I'm not paying any taxes, that still would not in any way, shape, or form dissuade his followers. Remember the years of trying to get the Trump tax returns, then they got the Trump tax returns to show Trump then paying taxes, and his supporters said, well, good, he shouldn't have to pay any taxes. That's how you make money. So I think people got to get this idea out of their head that there's going to be this aha moment that's going to snap people out of this Bengalian trance that they're in. But what the prosecutors do need to do is connect him in any way, because at the end of the day, it may end up being that a felony conviction is the only thing that will stop the MAGA train from rolling, because he'll be at that point disqualified for running for president with a felony conviction on his record. But other than that, anything else is just going to be a political boon for his supporters who think every single thing on the face of the earth is a conspiracy against President Trump. They think the coronavirus is still, despite killing 600,000 people in the U.S. and 4 million people worldwide, that was just a conspiracy and it was made up just to hurt Trump's reelection chances. So there is no logic that's going to get across the line with these folks.
I mean, Dwight, where do you see this going?
Well, it depends on what happens. And Robert, you make a great point, is that they they can't arrest him. They may convict him. They can't arrest him because then you turn this political situation into a military situation. It becomes a little warfare at that point. If they arrest Trump, his followers would see this as a conspiracy to control the government and a takeover of America, and they are patriots with guns, and they will declare war on America and on democracy. I warned you all of this last year about this time, that these guys are militia guys, and in their definition, the militia are those that protect the people from the government. And they will see it as a government conspiracy, and they will turn on the nation, and it will become a real violent situation. And so they have to be very careful because you're really kind of playing with fire in this situation.
CK, as you've laid the facts out for us, let me ask you this. I mean, because you understand the corporate world. I mean, is this is what the Trump organization has, what they have done, what the indictment says that they have done? Is this like standard operating procedure in big business or not?
I think in some respects it is for some big business, not for all, but for some. Mm-hmm. So as Dwight McKee, I think, said, bankruptcy for some is a strategy. That is a strategy. When you really have gotten in over your head, you've kind of raked in the money, you've been making millions and billions, and then, you get into a little situation and you can't meet your obligations, huge obligations. Bankruptcy is a strategy that's used to protect assets and the like. So on some level, what Trump has done is part of a business strategy, but I do not believe that it is general operating procedure for most big businesses. Mm-hmm. I think he's taken it to the extreme for business people who simply believe, as our former president believes, that they are untouchable, that they are above the law. And I think what he said was, I could stand and I could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and nothing would happen. Not that his base would not support him, but nothing would happen to him. That's what Trump was saying, as I understood it, and he really believes that. So I do think part of this is the way big business operates. Some big businesses operate, but I do think that Trump has taken it to a different level and may have some exposure. I happen to believe slightly differently than Dwight McKee and Robert Patillo on this. I believe that something could happen. I believe that the Manhattan DA and the Attorney General of New York will get to the point where they will arrest Donald Trump if the evidence supports it. I have a completely different view. Will they understand that there will be political fallout? Yes, but they're not concerned about that political fallout. They're concerned about getting an indictment and justice. And in their minds, where there are financial crimes or financial enterprise of this magnitude, which is what they believe, if it's justified, I think they'll go for it. The political analysts are saying, there will be just sort of the analysis that Robert and Dwight are making. But this Manhattan DA's office and the Attorney General of New York, they're not looking at it that way at all. Now, what will happen ultimately, I just believe if they have the evidence and they can link it, they're not going to be thinking of the political fallout because that's not going to be their concern. That's what the Democrats and the Republicans nationally are looking at. Now, and I believe that if that does happen, that will incite and mobilize his base even more. But I don't think that the New Yorkers, these prosecutors, are looking at that at all. They see blood. They want blood. They've been working on this for a long time. They've had the whole presidency to work on this because they suspected this before. And now they had an indictment on his top person. And remember, there are other people around Trump that have also been indicted and on all that too. And he pardoned many of them, but he's no longer president. He no longer has presidential powers. Mm-hmm. And good luck. He will not be able to convince any New York State governor to pardon on New York issues at all. So I think this is really a different day. Yes, it would be history for a former president to be indicted, but history's already been created with all the things that Trump has done. I'm not aware of any former president that has been engaged allegedly in a corrupt financial scheme, allegedly, as we're seeing here. And these allegations, to be clear, are directed to the former president. It's not just, oh, let me get this one. They're directed to the former president. If you look at some of the documents and some of the allegations, they really are clearly, they have their eye on the prize, and that is the president. Just as with RICO allegations and when you had, big mob bosses in New York and throughout the country, they're using the same methodical approach to get to Donald Trump. And they believe they can. So we'll just have to see.
Well, I've got 1 minute for you, Dwight, and Dwight, 1 minute.
Yes, let me clarify myself. I'm not saying nothing will happen to Trump. I'm saying that if something does happen to Trump, there's going to be a consequence to pay. It's that the Manhattan Project, in the original Manhattan Project, created the atom bomb. There was a consequence to that. Is that in this situation, if Donald Trump is indicted and he goes to jail, what I look at is that all of that political energy and that animosity that his crowd has will be converted into a military operation. And what you will see is violence break out all over the country strategically as a military operation, because in the minds of his followers, they will see this as subversion and a military coup to keep him from ever becoming president, which they think is his destiny. And so my fear is not so much, my belief is not so much that nothing would happen to him. My fear is something will happen to him, and it will convert itself into violence and hostility.
The political consequences.
That's why I predicted in January 6th that rally was going to turn into a full-fledged operation.
And it did. I've got 1 minute. Robert Patillo, your thoughts?
My thoughts are we have to monitor these things very closely, watch for the political fallout, and like they say, if you're going to throw a rock, make sure you throw it right. The prosecutor cannot miss with this. They cannot be showing up and show that give the Trump base any more ammunition that there's a fake prosecution. So they have to make sure they have a sound case.
Wow. Everybody, pay attention, pay attention. One of President Trump's supporters, was asked what would happen if he's not restored to power in August. He said civil war. A lot of people have a lot of thoughts on this, and I think that we need to pay attention. We're not trying to be alarmists here. We're trying to be political realists and just realists about where we are in the United States today. So, everybody, let's talk about the 4th of July and what it means to you. Some people say that African Americans shouldn't support or should not celebrate the 4th of July, and they say that is what Frederick Douglass called upon us to do. That is not true. That is not true. He still held out hope for this nation, but he did indict the nation. He did call out the nation's racism and lack of dedication to freedom. What about the indigenous people of this country? We're going to have the principal chief of the Cherokee Nations, Chuck Hoskin, on with us at the bottom of the next hour to talk about how they feel about the 4th of July. Back in just a minute. Thank you all so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. I was hearing a sucking sound. Did you hear that, Cosme? Cosme and Dylan?
Hello?
Okay, hey.
Hello?
Yeah, did you hear that sucking sound?
Some of that, it would come in and out. I've noticed when McKee would get on,
Okay.
I should have reminded him to let the callers know not to be on speaker potentially, but I noticed it would come in and out. Sucking sound I didn't hear, but I did hear kind of like a whooshing sound.
Yeah, that's what I mean. That
like
just can you work that out, please? Please.
Are we having these guests? Are we keeping these guests on to the next hour?
Just for a little bit. for a little bit, but just if you can, queue up these guests so that they can know, what to do and what not to do, right?
I will let them know. Yeah, but
Okay.
stay in the
Okay, no,
car.
thank you, but let me let them know because I'm going to keep them on just for a little bit. CK, Dwight, and Robert,
Yes.
I'm going to keep you all on very briefly at the top because late last night I started getting all of these calls about people who could come on. So we're going to have Chief Hoskin on, but he'll be on at the bottom of the hour. So I would like to get brief comments from you at the top about what the 4th of July means to you. And then I'm going to go to Reverend Dr. Robert Turner. He's the pastor of the historic Vernon AME Church, the church where they're establishing the prayer wall in Tulsa. He was our host when we were there. Their basement is one of the few structures that survived the massacre in Tulsa.
Okay. Cosme is telling me that Robert Turner is going to voicemail.
No, honey, just keep trying them.
I know, but
I appreciate it.
I need to get on.
Okay, I appreciate it, but just keep trying them, and you don't have to send me a long note. Just keep trying them.
That's fine. Let me tell the guests right now since it's on the line.
Thank you so much.
To all the guests, so that while you're here, if possible, please get off like speakerphone, or if you're in the car, potentially raise your windows just so your message is clear. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Okay. Flora, you said it's a day off in American freedom is everyone's celebration. I hear you. And I really am opening my ear. And I think that we should open our ears to everyone's take on the 4th of July, because different people have different takes on it. And I think we need to respect that.
Attorney Fancher's on.
Okay, Attorney Fancher,
Good morning.
how are you? Happy 4th of July.
Same to you.
Thank you so much. And we're going to get some brief comments from Attorney Hoffler, from Attorney Patillo, and Dwight McKee. Then I'm going to pivot the conversation to you and to Reverend Dr. Robert Turner. Reverend Dr. Turner is the pastor of the historic Vernon AME Church in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Of course, he was our host when we were there for the 100th anniversary of the 100th anniversary commemoration of the Tulsa massacre. And they're establishing a prayer wall in the basement of his church, really at his church. That was one of the few structures that survived the massacre, that survived the bombing of the Greenwood district in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So, and in fact, he stood in front of City Hall when he was first assigned to Tulsa. Every Wednesday, he stood in front of City Hall. People thought he was nuts, with a megaphone, with his wife and their 2 beautiful sons. And he was pleading the case, making the case for Tulsa. And it was that kind of bold action that really shone a new light on Tulsa, and we're so grateful to him for his work. But I think it's important for us today to talk about what the 4th of July means to each of us. Nina and Carol and Kenneth and Effie and Jewel and Kenneth and Vicky and Flora. That's right. I want to hear your voices, Melissa, D. Ray, Andre, everybody, L. Stanley, Janae, Meddy. Want to hear Mark Hay. Want to hear what the 4th of July means to all of you. Please, everybody, like and share. So, okay, you can hear that, Dylan? Okay, we can hear someone. Make sure no one's on speaker, yes? No one's on speaker? Okay, Dylan, can you all help me with this, please?
I was on speaker, but I had you on mute.
Oh, okay.
When you said no one's on speaker, I took it off speaker.
Okay, no one can be on speaker when we're on the air. Dylan, why don't you walk them through what they need to do?
Right.
Yeah.
On the air, I'm not on speaker.
Okay, no worries. But Dylan needs to walk you through what you all need to do. He's going to prep you. Okay. Dylan, please.
All right, great. Yeah, everyone. Hi. Just make sure that you're off speakerphone, and that the phone itself is held close to your face so that we hear you clearly. If you're in the car, raise your windows if possible. That makes it so that it's clear, and possibly move to a quiet place if possible. a place where there's not a lot of background noise, so it's only your vocals, and that should make it clear.
Okay.
Okay, we need you in quiet places.
Is telling me that who
Reverend Dr. Turner.
Dr. Turner, yes, is still going straight.
Okay, no, just keep on. Just keep on. That's okay. Just tell him that happens. That's okay. But just let me know. You don't have to tell me that. Just let me know. Send me a text and let me know that you've gotten him, okay? Thanks so much. Okay. Okay, who am I texting today, Dylan? Is it you or is it Cosme?
It's Cosme. He's just calling right now.
Okay, very good.
Just helping him out.
Thank you so much. Okay, everybody. So we're going to find out what the 4th of July means to each of you. Okay. Okay. Yep. And if you do go on mute, please, as you hear the conversation shift, please come off mute so I can come right to you. Okay. Thank you so much.
10 seconds.
All right.
We were behind and we are, I set it up. We're coming back. It's actually 20 seconds.
Okay. Thank you. I'm looking at the clock here.
No. 30 seconds.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey, everybody. Happy 4th of July weekend. I'm Santita Jackson. I'm coming to you from WCPT, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, right here in Chicago, and AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota in Minneapolis, St. Paul. It's 4th of July weekend. I want to know what the 4th of July means to you. What does it mean to the indigenous people of this hemisphere? What does it mean to the Black person whose ancestors had been enslaved here? What does it mean to the child of the white immigrants, of the European immigrants? What does it mean to you? I think it means different things to different people. And if we listen to each other, I think that we can really, really come together in this American project because we all approach it very differently. And yet the undercurrents, there are a lot of undercurrents of commonality. So let's talk about that today. Let's talk about Frederick Douglass's speech. Let's talk about what it means in the aftermath of the Tulsa commemoration, the first bombing in the United States history on our soil. It was not in Pearl Harbor. It was in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and it was by white Americans on Black Americans. How do we make sense of all of this? What about the indigenous people? We're finding hundreds, the numbers in the thousands of children who were buried at these schools in which they were to have been Europeanized. It's certainly in Canada, they're having their own reckoning on their own Freedom Day. They're wondering, how do we celebrate it now in the light of these discoveries that are coming every week? And we have yet to make these discoveries here. We did the same thing in the United States. So call me or text me at 773-763-9278, 773-763-9278. 9278, that's WCPT. GWC Injury Lawyers gives you the opportunity to text, but I want you to meet my morning stars here on the Santita Jackson and Friends page, Santita Jackson and Friends. And okay, we are also on the YouTube channel, the Santita Jackson Show channel. Like and subscribe. And everybody like and share. Meet me on Twitter at Santita J or on Instagram, Santita Jackson IG, everybody. Let's get to some of these headlines so we can get to this stirring conversation today. Chicago, we'll have a high of 70 degrees, partly cloudy. Minneapolis, St. Paul, 88 degrees, mostly sunny. The Dow closed up 131 points yesterday. The NASDAQ closed up 18 points. The S&P 500 closed up 22 points. Well, the Twins and the White Sox faced off, and the White Sox are triumphant, 8-5 over the Twins. The Twins will be playing the Royals later on today. The White Sox will be facing off against the Tigers, and the Cubs will be facing off against Cincinnati. Wow. The Bucks won 23. The Hawks won 12. That tells a story, everybody. The House voted this week to create a select committee to investigate the deadly January 6th attack of the U.S. Capitol. And it's immediately becoming a politically contentious assignment, according to the CNN report. Republicans have made it clear that they're not interested in House Minority Leader. They're not interested in being a part of this at all. And House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy has threatened the House Republicans. He said he'll strip them of their party assignments, of their committee assignments, if they respond to a request from the Speaker of the House, who is actually his superior. This is going to be very, very interesting. So far, the Republican who has accepted this assignment is, not surprisingly, Congresswoman Liz Cheney. We will see how all that works. More local officials in the U.S. are sounding the alarm over another possible wave of COVID-19 infections, just as people are setting off for the July 4th holiday by the millions, everybody. Places in Arkansas have seen a surge. They've seen a surge in Los Angeles. Indeed, they've been asking Los Angeles whether you have received the jab or not to wear a mask. What do you think about that? In the meantime, to combat the spread of the Delta variant, the Biden administration is planning to deploy response teams across the U.S. to areas with high infection rates. The Supreme Court has dealt a big blow to the fight to preserve voting rights in the United States. The court yesterday ruled two provisions of the Arizona voting law that restrict how ballots are to be cast do not violate the Voting Rights Act, that bars regulations that result in racial discrimination. Some people are even now calling the Voting Rights Act a dead letter, that it has been completely gutted. Critics see the ruling as essentially gutting the Voting Rights Act. What do you think about that? You know, we'll talk about that next week on the Santita Jackson Show. This also means that the restrictive voting laws that Republican-led states are implementing this year are likely to withstand legal challenges. We have no voting protections, everybody. Wow. So let's get to the 4th of July, everybody. Let's get to the 4th of July. That's a wonderful segue to what we're going to be talking about right now. What does the 4th of July mean to you? What does it mean to you? Tell me, call me at 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278. I want to hear your thoughts on the 4th of July as we go into this holiday weekend. Of course, at the bottom of the hour, we're going to have the Principal Chief of the Cherokee Nations, Chuck Hoskin, to tell us how indigenous peoples, he is the head of one of the largest indigenous nations in this hemisphere. How do they celebrate or commemorate or really wrap their arms around the 4th of July, Independence Day, on land that was stolen from them? How do those who are descendant of those who've been enslaved, how do you respond to the 4th of July? How does the child of white immigrants, or the grandchild or the descendant of white immigrants, how do you look at the 4th of July? There are a whole lot of different ways that we approach this. The Asian, we're from everywhere in the world. The 4th of July means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. Let me start with you, Attorney C.K. Hoffler. You've had a unique experience among most Americans. You've lived in and out of the country throughout your life. Well, what does the 4th of July mean to you?
Well, Santita, you're right. I have lived in different countries. I grew up in different countries. And for me, the 4th of July is really just a holiday. It doesn't a holiday because it's a holiday where, if you are an American citizen, people have the day off. It's not a symbol to me of, when people talk about what the 4th of July means, I don't look at it traditionally the way that Americans look at it. It's simply just a holiday. I'm not celebrating anything. I'm not celebrating independence because I don't look at it that way. My history, and this is personal to me, on the 4th of July, I can't say that is Independence Day for me because even intellectually, I feel that as a people, we're still not completely free. But whenever we have holidays, meaning that other groups, cultures celebrate and that are recognized in the United States, and that means that there's a day off, I take the day off. But it's not a celebration in my heart of the independence of the United States because I don't look at it that way. And it's not that I'm anti-American, much to the contrary. It just doesn't mean freedom for me and independence, because what we've seen way after that has been enslavement and a lack of freedom for the group that I identify with, which is African Americans. So that's how I look at it, but I do take the holiday. I do get together with family, but it just doesn't have the same symbol for me because of the history that my people have had in this country.
Robert Patillo.
Well, you know, it's interesting because I use the 4th of July as a occasion to think about what it took for those founding fathers, quote unquote, to launch a revolution. After the French and Indian War had turned into the 7 Years' War, really the first world war across the globe, the way that the crown had to pay for it was by slightly raising taxes on imports, something that really only affected the rich bankers, the rich traders, the rich planters in the northeast part of the country. That's really the only people who were affected by the quote-unquote intolerable acts, which led to revolution. And then I think about the condition of black folks in this country over the last 400 years. The fact that all it took was them taxing tea slightly for these people to take up arms and start dumping tea into harbors and steal an entire country away from the British, and the black folks have been nice enough in this country to only want equality, not revenge, to only want what is guaranteed to us in the Constitution instead of wanting to break away completely. I take the 4th of July as an occasion to remember that the American promise could not have been fulfilled without those who were enslaved for centuries, could not have been fulfilled without the natives who were robbed, who were raped, who were put onto reservations. It could not exist without them. To remember that we will never connect the nation without those Chinese immigrant workers who built the Intercontinental Railroad, that we would not have the oil riches we had without stealing millions of miles of land from the Mexican Americans who survived in the Southwest. So I take it as an occasion to remember what America is, but also remember the promise of America, which is that all these people can come together and create a governing majority. This is not something that can happen in old Europe. The reason that you have a Balkans, the reason that you have many Germanic nation and a French nation is because they separate each other, separate their countries along ethnic lines, along social economic lines, along linguistic lines. And in America, we figured out how to not do that. And that going forward, the way that this nation survives is to fix many of those founding birth defects that we've had as a nation and build on the quote-unquote promise of America in a way that is respectful and contemplative of all the diverse members of the melting pot.
Mark Fancher, Attorney Mark Fancher, your thoughts?
Well, I have to say that Frederick Douglass speaks for me when he said, quote, "The sunlight that brought life and healing to you has brought stripes and death to me. This 4th of July is yours, not mine. You may rejoice, I must mourn," close quote. I think that this country has no right to exist morally because it was built upon stolen territory. It required a campaign of genocide against the First Nations peoples who were here. It was built on the backs and the labor of African people who were kidnapped and who were enslaved. And beyond that, it, by its own admission, has been a country that was not intended to be of benefit to anybody but white people, and specifically white males with property. And I'm not just saying that, as rhetoric. I'm looking at what the Supreme Court of the United States said. In the Dred Scott opinion in 1857, it spoke specifically about the Declaration of Independence. And it said, quote, "But it is too clear for dispute that the enslaved African race were not intended to be included and formed no part of the people who framed and adopted this Declaration of Independence. For if the language as understood in that day would embrace them, the conduct of the distinguished men who framed the Declaration of Independence would have been utterly and flagrantly inconsistent with the principles they asserted, and instead of the sympathy of mankind to which they so confidently appealed, they would have deserved and received universal rebuke and reprobation," close quote. it can be made no more clear that African people were not intended, and to the extent that there may have been suspicions that First Nations, indigenous people were intended to be part of it, the Supreme Court dispelled that notion too in the case of Johnson versus McIntosh, where it referred to them as savages who were wasting the territory. We have to look at what was intended and then what was actually done. Certainly the enslavement of African people was brutal. The massacre of African people in Tulsa and other places was brutal. The massacre of First Nations people at Sand Creek and other places where it was, such a perverse massacre where at Sand Creek, the U.S. cavalry went in and carved the genitalia from the women that they killed and saved them as trophies. And you look on up through history, through the years, at the discrimination, the oppression, the exclusion, the killings by police in current times. This country has no moral right to exist. And if I celebrate anything, it's the spirit of the people who have been oppressed and their ability to endure, their ability to survive all of this, and the potential, the promise that the people of this country of all colors have, the opportunity that they have to dismantle the entire thing and begin a second reconstruction, to start from scratch and to build something that's truly just, something that acknowledges the rights to the First Nations people to this territory and returns it to them, and then asks permission from them about what we can and should do with this territory, whether we should stay, whether we should leave, and if we stay, under what terms and what conditions. I have to take these kinds of positions in my own mind just because of my commitment to Almighty God, because what has been built on this territory is an offense to him. And again, I have to quote Frederick Douglass when he said, "And let me warn you that it is dangerous to copy the example of a nation, Babylon, whose crimes, towering up to heaven, were thrown down by the breath of the Almighty, burying that nation in irrecoverable ruin," close quote.
Dwight McKee, your thoughts?
Oh, wow. And I say this unapologetically, Robert, is that it would have been better for us if the British would have won. Is that the first Emancipation Proclamation wasn't Lincoln, it was Dunsmore. Dunsmore in 1775 told any African slave that if they joined the British Army, they would be liberated. And they were. 20,000 blacks joined and fought with the British. And 100,000 blacks left the plantations when the British were in charge. It's 7,000 of them went to Nova Scotia to live, to set up the groundwork for the Underground Railroad. 3,000 went to Jamaica, and 1,000 went back to Sierra Leone. Is the British had set up for independence for blacks who had fought on the British side. But that's the reason that Paul Revere them had to raise Christmas edicts to such standard, so that the other slaves would have a reference point for who they wanted them to become. Is they wanted them to fight for people who was perfectly willing to keep enslaving them. The reality of it all is the only reason that the blacks ended up joining the Patriots is that George Washington put a proclamation out saying any black who joined the British would not be a prisoner of war. He'd be killed on the spot, which is what Francis Key talked about in the third stanzas of Star Spangled Banner. That's what he was talking about, which is why Kaepernick wants to stand for that song. The reality is that had the British won, they outlawed slavery 50 years before the colonists did, America did, and they were more committed to the real proposition of liberty and equity than these Americans who had built their whole economy on the prerogatives of our slavery, us being plundered, our women being raped, and the Indians being massacred. we would have done better if the British would have won.
CK, what do you think? Do you think we would have been better under what is still a constitutional monarchy?
No, I don't. I really don't. I think it's, under a constitutional monarchy, the same people would have been enslaving us. So I think that, slavery, torture, oppression, entitlement, none of it's good. Whether it's in the form of a monarchy, whether it's in the form of a republic, it's not good. And that's the history of the world. And that's the history of how this country was founded. So I don't think that we would have been better off. But I do think that as we look back on history and celebrate different things, I don't think celebrating the independence of this country in that way should be celebrated by me and by people of color who built this country. This country, we are the backbone of this country, and yet we are the most oppressed. Not to mention the indigenous people whose lands were stolen from them, and there has never really been appropriate reparations for the indigenous Americans, for the original Americans in this country. So when we talk about, that's why I say I don't consider it a celebration. It's just a holiday, like other holidays that we celebrate in this country where you get a day off, but it doesn't have any profound meaning to me because I don't view that. When my people were enslaved, killed, brutally murdered, raped, that during that time, that exact same time, there's no reason for me to celebrate because that was not our freedom. There was no independence. There was more enslavement. So that's just the way I perceive it. But I do respect other people having the ability to see it through their lens. So if somebody, for them, if they're from the Daughters of the Revolution or whatever, I may, and their forefathers were slave owners, and I'm sitting and talking to them today, I'm going to respect that they feel that this is a celebration of independence. I'm not going to agree that that's what it means to me and to the majority of Americans. At least it shouldn't be, and definitely people of color. But I'm going to respect that people celebrate for their own reasons. It's just not a celebration for me. But I'm not saying no to the holiday. I just don't celebrate it as independence.
Everybody, what do you think about this? What do you think of the holiday? What do you think of it? What do you think? What do you think? What do you think? Frederick Douglass had a lot to say about this, a lot. He said, allow me to say in conclusion, notwithstanding the dark picture I have this day presented of the state of the nation, I do not despair of this country. There are forces in operation which must inevitably work the downfall of slavery. Quote, the arm of the Lord is not shortened, close quote, and the doom of slavery is certain. I, therefore, leave off where I began with hope, while drawing encouragement from the Declaration of Independence, the great principles it contains, and the genius of American institutions. My spirit is also cheered by the obvious tendencies of the age. Nations do not now stand in the same relation to each other as they did ages ago. And he goes on, and I will continue to read. But times change, people change, things have changed. Things are not the way they were in 1619 or in the 1500s when the Spaniards got here. Things have changed, but have we changed? Are we fighting to make the change? Are we fighting to create a more perfect union and advance new American rights, as my brother, Congressman Jesse Jackson's book, that is the title. Are we doing that? What does the 4th of July mean to you? Call me at 773-763-9278, 773-763-WCPT. And we're going to hear from Principal Chief of the Cherokee Nations, Chuck Hoskin, in just a minute. Oh, you all are wonderful. Would you all like to stay in here, Chief Hoskin?
I'm going to have to run.
We love you, CK.
I'm going to have to run. And so what I'm going to do, because I do want to hear him, but I'm just afraid to put it on the phone on mute, of course.
Yes.
And speakerphone so I can hear it and do my next thing. But I'm going to try and multitask. But I do have to run because I have another commitment. But I want to say I got a lesson in history this morning, which I always do when Dwight McKee and Robert Patillo and Mark Santita are on the line. And Santita, thank you for that, because I just, it's so interesting when we go into the stores and we see all this paraphernalia and billions of dollars spent on celebrating the 4th of July. It just doesn't feel like a celebration to me, but it does feel like a little holiday.
Well, Coach May, please get the chief on, please. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm going to do that right now.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, but thank you all so much. Okay.
And the question that'd be interesting to pose is, I was just going to say, I think our children have absolutely no idea. Our children in schools, especially our children, have absolutely no idea that there's even a thought that people feel that this is not a reason to celebrate. I mean, not a thought, not a clue, not a sense, not a concern.
Well, some of that is our fault.
Or not taught.
Our Jewish brothers and sisters teach their children their history, and they teach it from their perspective. And we're the ones who have to do that. You can't, and Carter G. Woodson, Dr. Woodson said, do not give your children to your enemies so that they can teach them about themselves. That's crazy. I mean, that's what we should be doing in our churches, and with all of these institutions that we've created. We're the ones who are going to have to do it. But we welcome to the show. I'm honored to have, once again, the Principal Chief of the Cherokee Nations, Chief Chuck Hoskin. How are you? Junior, excuse me. It's important.
Santita, I'm doing well. It's good to hear your voice. Good to be with you all.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Well, we are featuring you because left out of this conversation, we do have the great Frederick Douglass and his meaning of July 4th for the Negro. We have that great speech. And really, it's a great paper. It just takes us through our history here. But we don't hear the voice or the voices of our indigenous brothers and sisters. And I'm so glad that you, as the Principal Chief of the Cherokee Nations, are here and listening in. Of course, is Dwight McKee, founding member of Operation Push, as a matter of fact. He and Aline Walker were our two youngest board members from 50 years ago. And he's with the National Action Network and other organizations now. Attorney Mark Fancher, National Conference of Black Lawyers, and Robert Patillo, who's the Southeastern Regional Director for Rainbow Push. He also hosts his own radio show on WAOK. He's going to try and get you from me like he does. He poaches my guests. That's all right. But he's got a great radio show down in Atlanta. It's the iconic talk radio station there. It's all right. I share. I share. So stay right there, everybody.
30 seconds.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Coach May. You're doing a great job.
Thank you, Ms. Jackson.
Yeah, of course. We've got callers, but I want us to hear from Chief Hoskin. I'm so glad that you made the time to be with us today. Thank you so much, Chief.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Change the world. We can change the world. We can change the world. We can do it. From a place of pain, war, and hate to a place of love. It's not too late. Gotta save the children. We can't wait. Let's change.
All right, everybody. All right. I'm Santita Jackson, WCPT, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota, and Facebook, the Santita Jackson and Friends page. Let me give a special thank you to my WCPT and AM 950 Radio families for giving me the space to have this show and for us to have this conversation. It takes some special people to allow conversations that are this honest, this earnest, this forthright to occur, particularly in this environment in which we don't have the freedoms that we really ought to have. And so this is a conversation that's full of complexity, full of nuance, and I'm glad that we're able to have it today. And joining Dwight McKee, social scientist, and Robert Patillo, Southeastern Regional Director of Rainbow Push, and of course, civil rights lawyer, and the host of his own radio show every Sunday from 1 to 4 Eastern Time on WAOK in Atlanta, and the National Conference of Black Lawyers, brilliant lawyer, historian, really. I don't know if he claims that title, but he certainly is that. Attorney Mark Fancher. We are honored to have the principal chief of the Cherokee Nations, Chuck Hoskin Jr., who's been with us before. We're so honored to have this head of state with us today, because indeed that is what he is. And Chief Hoskin, please, we've had the meaning of the 4th of July for the Negro from the great Frederick Douglass, our great emancipator. We've heard from so many people, but we really don't hear what the indigenous peoples, what the First Nations have to say. And particularly now, as we are seeing the challenges that Canada is having with the First Nations. Now many people are questioning, how do they celebrate their own sovereignty and independence as we unearth all of these children who've been buried, as we are now beginning to acknowledge to the north of us the injustices leveled against the First Nations, as we look at the stolen land and so much of the pain that has happened to the indigenous community that's gone unacknowledged. How do you approach the 4th of July, Chief Hoskin?
Well, first of all, Santita, thank you for having me on. I appreciate the fact that we can spend this time in this country, hopefully increasingly, not only acknowledging that there's a great deal to celebrate and say, look, compared to other parts of the world, other times in history, we can acknowledge freedoms that we have, but you don't have to make a choice between that and also talking about how far we have to go. And then I think I'm so grateful that we can talk about the foundations of this country and what and who they relate upon. And of course, it includes African Americans, but I'm so appreciative that we want to bring the Native American perspective into this. And in a very literal, physical, and real way, this country was laid on the foundation of Native peoples, and those peoples were displaced. That displacement and the subsequent various Indian policies handed down by the United States, which caused great injury to tribal nations, our cultures, our language, our children, and have cost us for generations and generations lots of broken promises. Those are all part of the American story. Those are all part of a discussion about whether there's justice in this country in 2021. And we can't fully celebrate and fully be free unless we have justice. And there's still not justice in this country for Native Americans. We're making progress. So I think for Native Americans, we think about our own family history. American Indians have been American citizens at least since the early 20th century. We've talked about that before in the show, that it took into the 20th century before all Native Americans were made citizens of this country. We also are citizens of our own respective sovereign Indian nations that we believe and see in real concrete ways stand alone and apart from other governments. And so we have that history. But I think for Native Americans, we think this country has so much further to go before there's justice in Indian country. And you can't have justice, and you can't have freedom, rather, unless there's that measure of justice for all of us.
When you look at the 4th of July, we don't hear the indigenous voices. We don't hear the First Nation voices. We don't hear about your experiences. We don't hear that we landed on your land.
We sure don't hear that in the larger discussion of this holiday. We could easily, though, start a discussion in this country. You could start it in classrooms with children. You could start it, in coffee shops with people talking about what they're doing this weekend. And you could do it easily by pointing to the actual Declaration of Independence, in which the framers of that document, as significant and as much enduring significance as that document has for the world in terms of a charter of some measure of freedom, incomplete as it was, it refers to Native Americans as merciless Indian savages. In other words, it identified people, human beings, as something to be conquered and mastered and overcome so that some measure of freedom could be gained for what was to become a new country. We only have to point to a founding document, really, to start the discussion about where this country began. And then you can take that conversation out more broadly to Native peoples who lived on these lands, and they were governing themselves just fine. and didn't need to be discovered by those who claim to have discovered us. Those are conversations that I hope that this young generation of Americans has more than I did when I was younger, and certainly more than my parents did. And you could go back further and further. So that's what progress, I think, on this holiday is whether we can have a fuller understanding of the foundation of this country. And part of it has to be a discussion about Native peoples.
Well, indeed, because we don't start with Native peoples. We start with 1776, and we're debating about how we start with 1619 or the 1500s when the Spaniards arrive here. Why don't you start this American project conversation for us?
Well,
where do
I
we begin?
that. Well, we need to start there. One thing I want to say is I'm real concerned about the backlash in this country over talking about what you just raised, which is we have to go back before 1776. So in any case, I know your question was more broadly to the audience, but that struck something in me that we are making progress, but I'm in a state in which they passed a ban on so-called critical race theory. And we're in a country in which there's a great deal of backlash against those ideas that we ought to think deeper and even deeper into history. But my apologies. Go ahead.
No apologies. I mean, because now it is illegal to tell that part of the story. To start where it actually begins, which is not in 1776.
Right.
So how do we move the needle, Chief Hoskins? We're talking with Principal Chief Chuck Hoskins Jr., the Principal Chief of the Cherokee Nations, about where we begin this July 4th discussion. Because, the Declaration of Independence, as imperfect as these men were who wrote these documents, as imperfect as the men who wrote the Bill of Rights were, these are documents that included in their bodies and really in their spirits the power to change, the power to grow. And that's what I think we all hold on to. That's why we're still here. But, where do we begin this? Because we are dealing with a backlash, but, every action merits an equal and opposite reaction. We've made a lot of advances. Because, you could have knocked me over with a feather when I spoke with you last year about the Supreme Court returning 47% of Oklahoma to indigenous peoples. I said, you mean to tell me we're going to honor a treaty with indigenous peoples? We've never done that before. So why don't you help us to begin this conversation? It is some progress. So where should we begin this conversation with all of our children, red, yellow, black, brown, and white? Oh, Chief Hoskin?
Yes, absolutely. Well, I think young people, irrespective of their backgrounds, where they live in this country, ought to know that there were people on this country who didn't need to be discovered, who were governing themselves, who had vibrant cultures and language, and that this idea that there was some handed down from the Almighty authority to discover lands and use resources, whether those resources were human beings enslaved or human beings displaced from their tribal lands, that is part of the foundation of this country. And that is something that some Americans don't want to talk about, and so we see things like a ban on critical race theory. But we have to talk about that as a country, and in some ways, particularly for young people, we can point to those difficult beginnings, but then we can take them through chapters of American history where there has been progress, and I think that's where young people can take some degree of pride in the country and where we've come, and acknowledging that we've got further to go. So that's what I think gets missed in this backlash, is talking about the genocide of Native peoples and the taking of our lands and the destruction of entire tribes. That's something that's difficult to talk about as an American, but we have to. But we can also say that America is a work in progress. Where have we made progress? And we could talk about what you and I talked about last year, which is the honoring of a treaty right of tribes in Oklahoma so that we are restored to our reservation status. We could talk about progress being made in healthcare and the environment on tribal lands, whereas generations ago, tribal leaders wouldn't have even had a role in what went on in their own lands. Now we do. And we could talk about other aspects of of American history that are really universal. That is advancing the cause on civil rights and voting rights, and contrast that with how this nation was founded, enslaving people to do the work. That's why I think this critical race theory decision or efforts really undermine all of us. It even undermines those that want to celebrate progress in this country, because you can't really celebrate unless you have the backdrop. And so the foundational facts about this country have to be told truthfully, and it has to include Native Americans. And we have to talk about how many tribes were lost. We have to talk about generations that were robbed of their existence, and we have to talk about languages that were lost, and we have to talk about how that still affects people today. But the fact that you've got an elected Indian chief on your show at least ought to point, particularly to young people, to this idea that there's hope in this country because there's progress. The Cherokee people are still here. Other Native people are still here. So I think there's all sorts of reasons that we can, as Americans, take some joy in the progress that we're making, Santita, unless we really talk about the really destructive beginnings of how this country was really founded.
Amen. I think that we've got to do that. Let me get a couple of callers in. Maria, what's on your mind today?
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
Hello, good morning. And it's a pleasure of the Cherokee. I love it. I love hearing all the different perspectives, as well as all those members of the panel. What I want to say is, I was born and raised in this country. My parents came from Puerto Rico. My ancestors include the indigenous, the Africans, and Europeans. So growing up in this country, I was taught that the 4th of July was a day of independence, because our young nation freed itself from the oppressive rule of the British King. I recognize that. But I always felt such a detachment, a remoteness to this, because as a Latina, I couldn't figure out how I fit in all of this, especially since this century-old oppression was brought to Puerto Rico in 1898 following the Spanish-American War. Because they didn't treat the people in Puerto Rico very well. In fact, the first governor was I hate to use the word, an Indian killing general. Okay, so can you imagine how he saw the Puerto Ricans, the Boricuas in Puerto Rico, who are a mixed people? So I never could reconcile it. It was always something that we got the day off from work, from school, and I always saw it as a day to get together with family and friends. And, of course, people love to use fireworks. So I don't think we really thought about how it affected us, the people who weren't, European, so to speak. And so for me, I agree. I think it was CK that said that there's really not, she doesn't have an attachment to it as well. So I just compartmentalized it in my mind. That's what I did. It's a holiday, it's a day off, it's time to have fun, fireworks, picnic, time to get together with family and friends. But
you know what, Maria, I think
the more aware I am.
And I think it helps us to contextualize it. I mean, because I hear you, Maria, and Maria says this, Chief Hoskin and Dwight McKee and attorneys Patillo and Fancher. She says this as she's also a lawyer. So, you're looking at the laws, you're looking at all of these things, Chief, and it's many people of color, particularly, I would say, indigenous and Black people have a conflicted relationship with the holiday. And I guess I'm trying to find out how we navigate these conflicts and come to a more perfect union, if you will, Chief Hoskin.
Yeah, well, what she raised really resonates with me. I mean, if we're going to celebrate a day that is about freedom, it ought to beg the question, freedom for who? And at different times in American history, when you ask that question, you can point to lots of people and groups that are left out. And what I appreciate about her comments is that as America expanded, not just on tribal lands, but on other indigenous lands around the world, did we uphold those principles of freedom. So freedom for who? And I think we're still asking that question today, freedom for who? So I think that Americans who are conflicted about this holiday because of their backgrounds or their history, whether you're a person of color, whether you're a person of color who happens to be the chief of the Cherokee Nation, whether you're anyone who has some depth of knowledge about the beginnings of this country that brought injury to people, I think you've got to talk about this holiday in terms of freedom for where we are in this country. Who's not free? What promises have we not kept? And that's not the stuff that big community celebrations are made of, because a lot of Americans want to use this day or the July 4th holiday for freedom and celebration and cookouts. Those things are appropriate, but I think that's an added ingredient to this holiday is to talk about freedom for who today? Who has the freedom today? Who still needs to achieve it, and what do we need to do as a country to get there? That can bridge into questions about voting rights and the attack on voting rights in this country. That can bridge into discussions about whether we're teaching this generation of young people the full of American history, warts and all. I mean, those are the kind of discussions that I would like to come out of a July 4th holiday. That doesn't mean we completely hang our heads and don't get together as families, but it means that we have some serious conversations in this country, and that's missing.
Amen to that. It's like, taking Jesus out of Christmas. How do you do that? you cannot do that. Mom May, what's on your mind today?
Hallelujah.
Come on, say, Mama D. Mama D, how are you?
I'm good. My father's mother was full-blooded Cherokee Indian. And if you're born in the country before it becomes a country, that should make you indigenous. But only the red man and the black man, the savage and the slave, could be born in America and still not be citizens in the land of their birth. And we're twin victims of the American genocidal Holocaust, because your land was snatched, we were snatched from our homeland. My question is, do you think it's enough to just say Juneteenth, Independence Day, and erase our history and come up with a theory, when all we need to do is teach the historic facts? So why aren't we doing that?
Well, Mama D, because we only have a few minutes left in the show, and wow, this is what a tremendous panel, and what wonderful thoughts you all have brought. Let me just go around and ask each of you to respond to Mama D and to give us your thoughts on the 4th of July, after all that's been said today. And we could say so much more. But Robert Patillo, your thoughts? About a minute.
Well, I think it's crucial that we have these discussions, and this is why people are so mad. This is why people are storming school boards. This is why they're marching around with signs, because they don't want any version of American history that includes the warts, that includes the bumps, that includes the imperfections. And ultimately, we are those imperfections that they don't want us to know about. So you have to start asking yourself the question, well, if they're trying to stop me from knowing this, then it must be something very important for me to know. And so it's crucial that we teach our children this history. We teach our children to respect the holiday, to respect the nation that you are in. It's a love it or leave it situation. But at the same time, understand the history that created it and how you have a role in making it better for those who come after you.
Dwight McKee, 1 minute.
I always say that Jesus says that though the truth and the truth shall set you free, that if somebody don't want you to know the truth, it's because they don't want you to be free. And so it's very, very, very important for us to deal with facts, to tell the truth, and that if we're going to go past our circumstances, to know what those circumstances were. I'm honored to be on the phone today with the tribal chief of the Cherokee. Part of my family is Cherokee. And Godspeed.
Mark Fancher, Attorney Mark Fancher. I'm struck by the fact that every time we talk about this nation, our nation's history, you always bring up the indigenous peoples. First, tell me why, and then give me your thoughts on the 4th of July.
Well, I think many believe that I'm extreme, unnecessarily extreme, when I take the position that we need to give the territory back to the indigenous peoples. But I think it's unavoidable. You cannot have justice in this territory until that is done. And it is with a hope that the indigenous peoples would say it's okay for us to stay, but they should have the right to proclaim and declare the conditions under which we stay. And if, by chance, there was a sentiment that we should leave, many people say that's too extreme. But we don't remember the fact, and it's ironic and helpful that the chief of the Cherokee Nation is with us. We have to remember that that nation was forced to relocate from the southeastern United States all the way across the country, traveling the Trail of Tears, and nobody gave it a second thought. It's only inconvenient, it's only disruptive, it's only a problem when the settlers are asked to relocate. It's never a problem when the indigenous peoples have been asked to do that in the past, and we have to keep that in mind.
Chief Hoskin?
Well, Santita, thanks again for having me on the show, and all of these comments have been, frankly, beautiful and compelling, and I, after listening to Mama D, I wonder if she shouldn't have the full hour sometime, because I kept listening to her comments. But I think two things, and it would be a bit repetitive for me to talk about. We need to teach history more fully in this country, and I believe that. I do think that, given that a lot of institutions and political jurisdictions are engaged in this backlash against the teaching the history, that those of us on the community level have to take matters into our own hands in terms of teaching our children. We have to do it at the family level. We have to do it at the community level. But I also want to say this. We've been making some good progress in the Cherokee Nation on talking with our own people about history. And I think for generations we didn't do that as well. We recognized in the Cherokee Nation Reservation Juneteenth as a holiday just recently. We've been doing things to celebrate the diversity and the wonderful diversity of our reservation. I also think that I'm going into a weekend in which what we have planned at Cherokee Nation looks a great deal like what you see across the country. And as we've had this conversation, as I've made my comments, I've started to think just on this program about what Cherokee Nation can do to add more fully to this conversation here locally. So if I want to put my money where my mouth is, or put words into actions, and I think we need to do more here on the Cherokee Nation Reservation to talk about the foundation of this country during this holiday, and that's what I'm thinking that we will do in future years.
Principal Chief of the Cherokee Nations, Chief Chuck Hoskin Jr., I'm honored to have had you today, sir. Head of state, if you will. Attorney Robert Patillo, of course, his own radio show, WAOK, every Sunday from 1 to 4. Brilliant Southeastern Regional Director of Rainbow Push National Conference of Lawyers, Black lawyers. The brilliant historian and lawyer, Attorney Mark Fancher, and Dwight McKee, brilliant social scientist. The great bard of Harlem, as Dr. King referred to Langston Hughes, put it this way: let America be America again. Sure, call me any ugly name you choose. The steel of freedom does not stain. From those of us who live like leeches on the people's lives, we must take back our land again. America, oh yes, I say it plain. America was never America to me, and yet I swear this oath, America will be. Out of the rack and ruin of our gangster death, the rape and rot of graft, and stealth and lies, we the people must redeem the land, the mines, the plants, the rivers, the mountains, and the endless plain, and all the stretch of these great green states, and make America again. Everybody, happy 4th of July, and let it be a thinking holiday for all of you. Well, we're out of time, Dwight. We're out of time. I got a hard break, but you can say a little something as we get on the other side of this break. But may God bless you all. Have a blessed 4th of July. Have a blessed 4th of July. I'm Santita Jackson. Can't wait to be with you next week. Happy 4th. I'm sorry, Dwight, I was up against that hard break, but please, we're still on Facebook Live. Dwight, what would you like to say?
I was going to say, Chief, if we just all stay with the British, we'd be free by now.
I think you had commented to me. Well, I cut out there, sir. Go on. Could you repeat that?
I said, Chief, if we'd all stayed and fought with the British, we'd been free by now.
That is a solid comment, and we ought to think about those alternative roads in history as we think back and look at the real facts. So, I thank you all so much. I've really enjoyed the program.
Thank you, and please, and my love to Kim Teehee, who we are fighting to. She should be actually a delegate to the House of Representatives, and we are fighting for that to happen. Just as Delegate Eleanor Holmes Norton, Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton from the District of Columbia, is seated, and she should really be a full member of the House of Representatives. Kim Teehee should be representing the indigenous peoples, and so that is something for which we must also fight. I want to send my love to everybody. Has anything been left unsaid? Robert, Mark, Dwight, does anyone want to say anything else as I let everyone go?
I'm good on this end. Thank you for letting me be part of this conversation.
Letting you be part of this conversation. You are part of this conversation. You know that. Blessings to you, and blessings to you, Mark and Robert and Dwight and Chief Hoskin. Thank you. God bless you. And Cosme and Dylan, thank you so much for a wonderful show. Have a great weekend, everybody. I love you, love you, love you, love you, love you, love you. And be safe this weekend, everybody. God bless.